Hi, everyone. Just bear with us while we just take care of some technical issues and make sure that everyone can see us going live. Okay, I think we should be live on the group now.
Have we lost Daniela? Oh, there she is.
She's back now. Hopefully we're live on the page. Just double check that it's all up and running and working. I think we're good. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our special Vindication Day edition of our JIGS session this month. I'm Nicole, and we've got Angie and Daniela here to join us for this special event. Some of you might have seen my post during the week on the book club regarding Vindication Day and what it means to us. And we were discussing the fact that we feel it's a time to sort of focus on educating ourselves and informing ourselves as much as we can of the false allegations from the past and those that are still ongoing, so that we as fans can sort of arm ourselves with the facts and the evidence, because as we all know, we have the facts and the evidence on our side. Unfortunately, it's not what is out there in the mainstream media, and therefore it's not what's out there in a lot of public opinion. And so Vindication Day for us is all about learning as much as we can, but also sharing that with the wider community and hopefully educating them a little bit and spreading awareness of Michael's innocence and the truth of these false allegations. So that's what our special edition of JIGS is this month on Vindication Day, all about kind of a study session to go back over the main details of the cases. They are quite complex when you start to get into the nitty-gritty of the cases. And so we're wanting to sort of show everybody where those where they can find some of these really good sources to take you through some of those more complex details. If you're new to the allegations and you don't know much, then these sources will help to inform you, and hopefully those people, you know, all the way at the other end of the spectrum who are already well informed may find some new useful sources as well. So hopefully it's enjoyable for everybody to learn something new. I'm sure we can all remember 16 years ago when when verdict day came about, where we all were and how nervous we all were. To be honest, I can't actually remember the time of day for me, because I know it was not at I think it was really, really early hours in the morning here in Australia. I'm not sure if my memory's serving me correctly. I think I remember waking up early to hear the news of what had happened, and not knowing. I went to sleep obviously the night before, not realizing that it was going to be announced, but waking up and finding out that it had been, and just hearing it on that morning news. Where were you both? Do you remember the day well, Daniela?
Yeah, I can remember. Of course, I'm a bit older than you guys are. Yeah, it was really strange because I stayed for years on a small Maldivian island. So, and these were days where it was not common to have like every room of the hotel having a TV. So all we had was one TV set in the staff area. And of course, all the staff would be from Bangladesh or from Sri Lanka, and they would like to watch their own programs, yeah, which I could not understand. And we could only get CNN. So by coincidence, it was just a coincidence that I grabbed that there has been allegations again, and there's a new trial on the way. And the first thing I saw, of course, is the report with the mugshot. So then I had a really struggle for weeks and for months to get into this crew area and make them put on CNN, because they wouldn't understand the CNN, but I wanted to see. I always got only like snippets, and yeah, I just tried to catch what I could. So, and Vindication Day, of course, I got from CNN then too. I was not live there, but I could see it in the evening news then. So, quite an adventure. So, and you, Angie?
Yeah, I was at work to get the time off because I was going through a court case at work. So yeah, I was working and it just had it on my computer, keeping my eye on it. But obviously, not a good day, and not it's good in the fact that obviously he was found innocent. But I think it was just that horrible thing of he didn't need to go through that, and the fact that how it was reported afterwards and how unjust it was. So I've always got mixed feelings with regards to this day. I mean, absolutely glad that there was no huge miscarriage of justice, but I don't think there's much more to be grateful for on it at all. I think it's all just the saddest sort of thing that's happened, really, all these allegations. So I think that's why it's important that getting the facts out there and everybody having those facts, particularly as I think we're still facing the possibility of Dan Reed doing another documentary. So I think it's good to be ready to fight again.
Yeah. Maybe this is a good way or a good point to address why we did this, because I go more along the line, not make a fuss out of this Vindication Day every year, because it only draws attention, to these allegations and to the trial, which we know it was just like, well, shouldn't have happened at first place. So, but our original thought was we realized that so many new members in the book club, and we could see the ages, so they did not live like we through it, and maybe they have some information, but it's just some information. And beforehand, we found out that a lot of people, or just from the younger book club members, are very interested in the whole subject and gaining more knowledge. And this is what the book club is about, gaining more knowledge about Michael Jackson. And so we did this, and we decided to do that. But I want to stress the fact this is the purpose it's done, and the purpose we tried to create it is to address the younger audience, if you want to say the newer fans, which are very, very welcome. And it's always nice to see how the legacy lives on in new people. They were even born after Michael Jackson died, and they're still interested, and that's for them. So please, if you are an older fan and you are very knowledgeable about this, keep this in mind, what we do here now.
Yeah, for sure, Daniela, exactly. And that's why we're hoping that, even for I know that there are sources that both of you have used that I haven't in the past. So hopefully, even for those people that do know and are knowledgeable, there might be something to learn as well. And like you said, for us, it's not a day of celebration, but it is a reminder to everybody to learn the facts and have that evidence there, because the facts and evidence are on our side with regard to these false allegations. And I'm insisting on continuing to say false allegations. We often say allegations, and I think we, as fans, we do need to emphasize that false part at the start, because that's exactly what they are. And the more we learn about it, the more we realize that, we'll get into that as we move into the different areas. So we've divided today's session up into 3 sections to focus on the three main sections. So first of all, with the 1993 Chandler allegations, and then we'll move into the mid-2000 Ibiza allegations, and the final section will be focusing on Robson and Safe Chuck. So I'd like to invite Angie now to start us off with the 1993 Chandler allegations and give us a little bit of a summary of that situation. Although it's a very complex case, so it's very difficult to summarize. So good luck with that.
Yeah, thanks. Just one thing to say, we will be sharing a document later on with sort of an overview of all the facts as well, because it is quite hard to get across. And obviously, as you're listening, you might forget things. And so we've just created a document as a factual one of all three cases of main points. There's obviously heaps of detail on these, so we're trying to not to go into too much detail, but really cover off those all those points and all the sort of facts in the order, and the key members, key people in all of the allegations. So with regards to the 93, this was involving a child called Jordan Chandler. He had become friends with Michael after, I think possibly many of you know the story, but after Michael's car breaking down, and they'd gone to Rent-A-Wreck, which was owned by Jordan's stepfather. Through that, this sort of relationship, friendship began, not relationship in any other way than a friendship, I mean by that. So they'd become friends, and June was his mother was very much friends with Michael as well. There was the biological father of Jordan, called Evan Chandler. Now, he wasn't really having anything to do with his child. He wasn't paying maintenance for his child, and there were issues with that. So Jordan really wasn't having much of a relationship with his father. Once his father, who was a Hollywood dentist at the time and wanted to be screenwriter, he did actually go on and do one script, which he sold, but you may have seen the film Robin Hood Men in Tights. So he was very much wanting to be in that world of Hollywood. Once he discovered that his son had a friendship with Michael Jackson, he then suddenly became very interested in his son. He invited Michael to stay at the house, talked to Michael about amending, do works on his house to have Michael come and stay over and things like that. So you can see it was very much an intention with his dad, where he was really only interested once his son had this relationship with Michael Jackson. So they sort of started, the friendship started in sort of the May 1992, and going through into 1993, things sort of change when really Michael stops calling or speaking to Evan Chandler, and therefore you then start to see this custody play around Jordan, because he feels if he's got access to Jordan, then he's got access to Michael Jackson. So I think you can see at the beginning of this, there's a real sort of custody element to it. The allegations really don't come till much later. So there's a fight between this sort of mother and father over Jordan Chandler. Now, Geordie isn't claiming that there was any sexual abuse, nor is his mother, but Evan starts to come across with this sort of theory, having been in contact with the attorney Barry Rothman. Now, one of the sources, just going to say, is Redemption by Geraldine Hughes. She was his legal secretary, Barry Rothman's. He was known as being a very sort of nasty man. And there are tapes where David Schwartz and June Chandler actually recorded Evan Chandler on the phone. You may have heard the tapes. You can certainly access them on YouTube, where you can hear him saying that he's gone to this lawyer. He's chosen him because he's the nastiest son of a bitch. He does mention that there's other people behind, sort of waiting on this plan, and that he can sort of ruin Michael Jackson, and basically is wanting money. It's sort of through with Barry Rothman that these allegations start to come to light. And one of the reasons being that Barry Rothman had done a case just before where they managed to win a father custody through claiming that there was some kind of sexual abuse that the mother had allowed to happen. So this sort of theory from a previous case started to come through here. So June started to face this issue within her custody battle as well, that she may be accused of allowing her child to be sexually abused, which would mean as well that she would lose full custody. So I think there are elements. We don't obviously know all the facts, but I think you can kind of see when you're reading between it that there's also a possible chance that June, because she doesn't really change into believing onto the allegation side till much later, that actually she's put under quite a lot of pressure with the fact that she may, one, have allegations made against herself, but also that she will lose, her child into the custody of Evan. So it goes from there, and basically Barry Rothman and Evan take it to Michael to sort of say that they want this $20 million. They and if they have that, then they won't say these allegations against Michael. The strange thing is, and that this was witnessed by Michael's lawyers, was that in that meeting, Evan Chandler goes up and hugs Michael Jackson, and he's all like, "Oh, I've not seen you in ages." All very, very strange. Michael sort of says, so a lot of the accusations at this time are more that Michael is stealing the attention of Geordie Chandler away from his father. So Michael actually makes offering of, okay, well, you two work together on 3 scripts, and I will give you, I think it was $325,000 each one that you complete together. That's declined. They want more money. Actually, Michael goes back and reduces it further and says, okay, 1 script for that amount of money. They then try to backpedal and get back to the sort of 1 point, whatever it is, 1 point something million dollars. And so that's where it kind of really begins now, where then the allegations start. So this sort of goes on now, what you had in California at the time, and actually this has changed as a result of this Michael Jackson case, that you could actually have a criminal case and a civil case going at the same time. So what was actually happening is, in the criminal case, they weren't finding any evidence. His properties, family's properties, doctor's office, there was another property, were all searched, and there was absolutely no evidence of sexual abuse. So after that, basically, the criminal case is really slowed down. So they're pursuing, really, their thing is to go after the money. So they're pursuing the civil case. Michael tries on a number of occasions to get that the criminal case goes first, because there was huge issues, because if the civil case was to go ahead, anything that he said during that time could then be used to amend the criminal case. So as they've said, you know, if they'd said, right, it happened on this date, and he had a way of proving he wasn't even with Jordan, they could then change that for the criminal case. So he would have given away his entire defence up front, and that gave the prosecution the ability to amend it. So Michael was really trying to get that changed to allow the criminal to go first. It wasn't that he was trying to avoid anything. The judge, very strangely, didn't want to allow this, and so continued to allow the civil case to go ahead. And that's where you see, literally the night before Michael is due to give his deposition for the civil case, that's when the settlement occurs. And that was obviously on advisors. There's been comment on whether this is business advisors more worried about Michael and the monetary, but also you can see that there was an element there of protecting him from going through this prior to a criminal, and what that could actually the impact it could have on the criminal trial. So there was a settlement paid. Obviously, it was all under a sort of non-disclosure agreement. Michael then went on to do the History album, and he also did the primetime interview with Lisa Marie, where on that he said that he couldn't speak about it, but he just mentioned that there was never any match on any sort of where there was mention of penis and markings and things. He mentioned there was no evidence ever to prove that he'd done this. That's all he said about it, and he produced his songs on the History album. With regards to this, Evan Chandler was apparently so enraged, he took a $60 million suit out against Michael Jackson for damages because of this album and this interview, which really didn't say anything. He then also demanded that he had his own recording contract to put out his own album called Evan's Story, instead of History. So that case actually went on for 6 years before it actually got thrown out. So you can kind of see the ridiculous nature of it. And the other thing really being, I mean, as we'll see as we go through the themes, is you never see them taking it to the police. I think one sort of key thing to mention here is the same players that you get all along. There's Tom Snedden involved in this first one. You get Diane Diamond around, but also I think a key one to mention, because I really feel it comes up time again in each of the allegations, is Victor Guterres. Guterres, can't say his name. So who was he? So just briefly, he was a freelance journalist, but he was a member of NAMBLA. Now, NAMBLA is the North American Men Boys Love Association, so it's pro-paedophiles. He was a member of this, and in 1986, he attended a meeting, and the decision was made that if they could get that Michael Jackson was a paedophile, because he was the biggest pop star, biggest person on the planet, it would help get the rest of us to believe that paedophilia was a good thing and it was all natural and all fine. So there was actually a motivation there to get Michael Jackson classed as a paedophile. So Victor Guterres, after the settlement, he actually wrote a book called The Secret Diary of Geordie Chandler. I've actually read that for this. It's horrible reading. There is absolutely no way it comes from a diary of a 13-year-old boy. You only have to look at all the language that's used in it and the details that would never, ever, what any child would write. It's vile. It accuses Michael of stoning his lion, animal cruelty. It's got many, many things in it, building him up in this. But the reason to mention this book is very much the stories that are said in here, you'll see get sort of parroted by Gavin Arvizo and then by James Safechuck and Wade Robson. And Victor Guterres has been linked into other things as well with regards to Diane Diamond and a gentleman, just trying to remember his name, who actually coached a child in Canada to make an allegation against Michael, but then he did actually break down in police interview and said that he'd been coached. Now, this gentleman was also a member of NAMBLA and he's serving a life sentence for paedophilia. And he actually came out years later and said that Evan Chandler and Victor Guterres had been in contact with him and were actually offering him money to do all of this. So it all links these sort of people together. So I think that's my sort of brief overview. Sorry, I know it's very hard to do because there's a lot to it, but that sort of gives you some context around this original allegation, which obviously we know left Michael open to the public's view, you know, some of the public, not all of the public's view, that he is a paedophile, the media to carry on with this narrative, and then all these other allegations.
Thank you, Angie. And you're right, it's such a complex case because we could continue to explain other parts that you haven't mentioned as well, because it is very complex. So thank you for trying to get all of that in such a short space of time. What we want to do now is to sort of discuss there's so many sources out there that you can access, a lot of books, but there's also a lot of articles and websites and even podcasts out there that are really informative. So Daniela, did you want to start us off with one of the ones that you find the most useful for yourself in learning about this first allegations in 1993?
Yeah, of course, I would go to a German site. Sure. And I'm going to share with you my German site now, because I think it's very, very useful. And there are like 2 billion German speakers in the world. So I think even in an English book club, I can do that. I'll see if I can share this with you. Can you see the site now? Or are you still seeing me?
No, I'm still seeing you, Daniela.
Yeah. Share screen. How about now?
I'm still seeing you.
Okay. Great job. Well, I can't do anything. It's just like it tells me my browser alarm. Okay, it just took a little. Now it should be. Yeah.
I don't think it's going to let you do it. Unfortunately.
Okay. Because, yeah, okay, there we go. Okay, I found this site, or I have this site. It's called All for Michael. You will find a link in our show note sheet. Yeah, yeah, something coming up.
It will come up, but you'd have to change your I can add your screen.
Yeah. Can you?
Yep. You'll just have to change your screen now. There we go. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. This is the German side. Yeah. All for Michael. So if you see this, it tells you all about the allegations and about the trials, and it's really nicely done because it also links you to important things, and like Square One. We're going to talk about this later on, I'm sure, because this is the most recent source about the 93 allegations, where they say, or where it's obvious that everything started from there. So this is all I want to say to show. So in this, you have to see about the Michael, the Veritas project. So you go to this tab, and everybody, like we talked before, and everybody said, "Wow, it's in German. It's in German. How we don't understand?" Listen, I've got a solution for this, because I found an English blogspot which has this Veritas project also translated in English. So, and why I think this is very useful is because you have here this flowchart. This flowchart shows you all the people, all the names involved in this 93 case. And it links them to each other. You can see this? You find the link there?
You can see it?
You can see it? Okay. So, and you find these connections here, and they are numbered. So, I'm going to leave the flowchart again. And if you scroll further down, down, right? So, the applications, no, I'm lost one of the pages. Okay. Anyway, on top of the flowchart chart, there is a link, and if you click this link, yeah, it tells you all about the connections from each person to the other, which are shown here. And there is an English site, a blogspot. We took this over, the Veritas project, which is translated in English. So you have to look this up, or you can look this up. And I think this is very, 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 very useful, just because there's so many names thrown around and everything. And so you can follow it by the flowchart. Well, I want to say, if I find a German translation and an English translation, yeah, I always tend to think, if you are not German speaking and your original language is also not English, yeah, you might look in the internet, because most likely you find a translation of things like this in your own language, which makes it a lot easier to understand. Because yes, there are lots of legal terms, documents, whatever, are translated, which is really hard to read in English, even for me. So, and what I also found most helpful is one video link, which you have here, which is about the latest court, Robson being thrown out of court here. But the lady also explains a lot of the legal terms in very understandable way. So maybe you want to watch something like this before, and then you are more accustomed to the legal terms, because yes, the US legal system is different than the German legal system, or the English, or the Spanish, or wherever you come from, probably also from the British. Am I wrong? So, and there we are back again.
So yeah, some great sources there, Daniela, and I think certainly the flow chart is something that I think a lot of people will find very useful as well. Angie, what's some of the sources that you think are really valuable for this particular case?
Yeah, I think one thing with this case is obviously to just bear in mind that in 1992 was when the internet was actually invented. So it's quite hard to find those original sources. One of the best ones I find is a website called the Michael Jackson Allegations.com, and that's got heaps in there. There are others as well, and one Vindicating Michael that you showed there, Daniela. So I think they're great because they also have a lot of the transcripts. So again, it's all very factual. There's lots of information on there. With this sort of document we're going to share later, you know, some of that comes from there, but just trying to make it a little bit more digestible. Yeah, there you go. That's the site. That's a really good site. The other thing I obviously showed was Redemption, Geraldine Hughes, because she was a first-hand witness to it all. So she was actually Barry Rothman, who was the original lawyer for Evan Chandler. She was actually his legal secretary. Barry Rothman actually had to stand down because Michael sued for extortion, and he then was concerned that he was in big trouble, so he stepped down from it, but very much remained a player in the background. And that then went on to, well, briefly through Gloria Allred, again, who we see come up a number of times, but then on to Larry Feldman, who again, it links to the Gavin Arvizo case. So Larry Feldman took it over, but she was the first hand witness to it, and certainly believes that there was an extortion attempt going on, and that this was all very underhand, and there was no real concern about the child or truly about allegations. It was about extorting money. So that's a good source. There's the original. I have actually got the original magazine somewhere. I was just digging it out. But this GQ article was Michael Jackson Framed as well. She has updated it in this slightly because she does mention about Jordan Chandler, I think, saying that he actually in 2011 or later sometime is saying that Michael never did anything. I've never found that actual source of that, so I don't know where she's getting that from, because as far as we know, you know, he stayed relatively silent, although we do know there's elements with the Gavin Arvizo where he refused to be part of that case and actually threatened to sue if he was made. So he stayed quite quiet, but she does mention that. So they're quite good. But generally, I would say the websites, because there isn't so many books on the 93. And then, of course, Square One, which I think was a great film made by Danny Wu. That was incredible for drawing it together. And it's just a shame that there wasn't something like this available all those years ago, really highlighting this. But that's a great documentary. I'm sure most people have seen that. But yeah, it's a fantastic amount of detail in there. So what about you? Anything else from you, Nicole?
I think for me, one of the most important parts of this case, I think, is the timeline and knowing those key dates. Because when you look, a lot of people know, and I think for myself, prior, like sort of maybe going back a few years even, my knowledge has increased in the last few years. But I knew a lot of the circumstances, but when you actually sit and really focus on the dates, the extortion attempt is even more obvious because of the order of how it happened. So the timeline is an important thing. And I think the Michael Jackson Allegations website has a PDF document that they call the condensed version of their website. And I've just, even though I've spent a lot of time on that website in the past, I thought that I would read the condensed version for this event today, just to see, you know, what was in there. And I think that that's a really excellent source, particularly for the timeline side of things, because it goes into an amazing amount of detail considering it's called the condensed version. But it does really highlight all of those key dates of when what was said and when all of the child custody hearings, the dates that specific things happened. And that really does, for me anyway, it really highlighted some of those, you know, the dealings between Rothman and Chandler, and highlights what they were attempting to do even more so. So I did comment just before on the comments that we've got a document together with all of these links. So one of those links will be the condensed version. And I think just to add to what you said as well, Angie, about the book Redemption, I've read that one as well. And I think for me, that also, obviously, you essentially are getting an inside look at the other's camp, if that makes sense, with regards to this, because Geraldine Hughes is working for Barry Rothman at the time. So she's effectively sort of giving inside information of what was going on the Chandler's side of things. And there's some kind of quotes that she gives where she's overheard them saying certain things. And I think that book is really quite valuable, because there's some things that they were saying that they just would not be saying if it wasn't an extortion attempt. And I did write a couple of them down. She overheard Evan Chandler saying, "It's my ass that's on the line, and it's me that'll go to prison if things go wrong." Now, a father who's claiming someone has molested his son has no reason to have their ass on the line. You only have your ass on the line if you're guilty of extortion. So that, that one line in itself. And the second one, when they were she overheard the two of them talking about how they needed to get their stories straight. Well, again, you don't need to get your stories straight unless you've got something fishy going on. There's a few things like that highlighted in the book that I think are quite essential for understanding that the other side, if that makes sense, but also the legalities side of things as well, particularly with regards to the settlement. I think a lot of people are aware that Michael was essentially backed into a legal corner with regards to the settlement. But I don't know if it's as well known as it should be that effectively his civil rights were being taken away from him, that he had grounds, and there are legal precedents which are quoted in the book in Redemption, whereby he should have been granted his motion of a stay of trial and discovery, meaning essentially the civil trial should have been postponed according to his Fifth Amendment rights. And that was being violated. And there's a reason for that law. It's to protect somebody from having to try a civil case at the same time as a criminal case for numerous reasons. And all of those things are well explained in the book Redemption. So I think that those two sources have been useful for me in learning some of those complexities and the legalities, because that's quite involved. Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I agree with you. It's all those bits, her insight. And I believe she's making a movie. I don't know if it's already made, but I know she's putting a movie out, wasn't she, of the book?
Yes, I did hear that, and I've seen a few links and some posters type of thing on Facebook that they're supposed to be making that into a movie, which would be interesting. And I think that's the great thing of Square One. You both mentioned Square One, and it's a great documentary. But I think the majority of the public aren't going to go out and read a whole book on the Michael Jackson allegations, as much as we would all like them to just, even that condensed version, which is only 79 pages, if we could get people to read that, they would be, so well informed of what the truth actually is. But perhaps we can sway a lot of people to watch an hour documentary. And that's the beauty of Square One, is that it does kind of succinctly put it all into a visual form, which may be more accessible for a lot of mainstream people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if it comes to mainstream people, I mean, you get hints here and there, and I just chip in. And if you do have the right information and you don't start babbling on for 2 hours about the thing, yeah, they get an ear for it, yeah, and maybe they ask, and then you can educate. I think this is the way better way than making somebody something to read, which is like 73 pages. Yeah. And I think also, I think also for the fans, it's very important, I think, to start at the beginning. Yeah, maybe you became a fan due to Leaving Neverland, or from Leaving Neverland, or you became a fan after Michael Jackson died, and then you maybe the 2005 Tribe. Yeah, but to understand it fully, it is necessary to start with 93. Because if you look then at the 2003 allegations, which ended in the 2005 trial, yeah, it's like a bad return from 93, yeah. And for this, I also think this flip chart and the connections are very useful, yeah, because you can really, and you can form your own opinion. It's not something telling you you have to believe this. You can form your own opinion about the connections, yeah, that it's the main players from 93 are still there in 2003.
Yeah, and that's really important to remember as well. Just to quickly mention too, there are some more podcast type sources that people can access that are probably more general sources, but I'll just mention them briefly here because there are a few that do cover specifically the 93 allegations. So the MJ Cast has got a number of episodes that focus on the allegations. One episode 58, if I remember rightly, 58, Pirates of Neverland, and that one, probably a good half of that, so it's about just over an hour long. The first section focuses on 93, with Charles Thompson going through a fair bit of detail around those allegations. So sometimes podcasts can be really good sources because you can listen to them while you're doing other things, driving or housework, or however you like to listen to your podcasts. So there's a lot of variety of sources that are available. But again, we will share a document with the Facebook group so that you can access all of those sources. Did anyone have anything they wanted to add about 93 before we move into the next section? We're all ready to go?
I think we're ready.
I think we're ready. So let's move into the 2003-2005 Ibiza allegations.
Okay, so try and give you a brief overview. And again, all of these, there's so much to them. They get so involved and complex. But basically, you've got Gavin Arvizo, a previous cancer sufferer, apparently quite an aggressive cancer that they couldn't really define. He has got his mother, Janet Arvizo, and at the time earlier he was with his dad as well, David Arvizo. He has a brother called Star and a sister called Davlin. Now, just for when you might see, there's a couple of names in here that you might see change around these cases. So Janet Arvizo is also known as Janet Jackson because she married someone called Major J. Jackson afterwards. She actually tried to ask in court to be called Janet Jackson, and Judge Melville wouldn't allow it. So Janet Arvizo, Janet Jackson in that scenario, they're the same person. And then just to mention Frank Cassio, who many of you know, obviously being a child that was Michael's friend and later worked for him, also known as Frank Tyson. So if you see the Tyson, that's Frank Cassio. Just as sort of a little heads up on a few of the people involved in that. So just taking it step back a little bit, there was the Martin Bashir, and obviously that's very much come to the highlight at the moment with around the report on Princess Diana and his deception around that, creating fake accounts and things like this. So that's very much been in the news now. Martin Bashir's documentary really was the terrible catalyst for all this. We can go into lots about that documentary, but we'll sort of park that. But I think most fans know about that documentary and know how he very much spinned it, and that there is a sort of a rebuttal video which was caught by Michael's cameras that you can watch called basically Take Two, the footage you were never meant to see. So that very much shows you can see the direct manipulation of Martin Bashir. So you have this documentary. Now, the Arvizos have never claimed that the abuse happened prior or during that documentary. So this is the very strange thing about it. It got aired and it obviously was very controversial, and there was a lot of focus in the press all around a scene where he was with Gavin and this mentioning of sleeping in a bed. Now, it is clarified in there by Michael that he actually slept on the floor. Now, actually, at that time as well, there was Frank Cassio was with him. Him and Michael both slept on the floor. And there was also Prince and Paris were there, and they were in the bed with the Arvizo children. So, but there was much made. And apparently a teacher watching this, then reported, after watching the documentary, reported it to the Department of Children and Family Services, and they started an investigation into Michael Jackson. During this time, the Arvizos were completely in support of Michael and were defending him. They praised him lots. There is actually 2 videos. One was Brad Miller, who was, I think, was private investigator. And then there is another video that was shot by Hamid, which was the rebuttal video, which you can see on YouTube, and we'll post links to all those as well. And you can see in that they're very, very much praising him. There's no sort of staging of this. It's very natural, and there's lots of praise in there, how much Michael did, how he managed to cure basically Gavin of the cancer by giving him the hope, because she'd been told to basically plan his funeral. She sort of seems to push her children to call him daddy and all of this. So there's very much a lot of praise. So this is post the documentary. Now, the Arvizo family have got quite a background to them, and it is worth knowing this to give context to what type of people the Arvizo's family are. So basically, back in, just checking my things here, I put this document. So in 1998, there was a case against the store J.C. Penney. Now, what had happened was Gavin Arvizo had stolen some items from the store. His dad, David Arvizo, was there at the time. Janet was, I think, in another shop or something. And there was this commotion and run into the car park. Now, she changes her story after 1 year and then changes it again after the second year. And she claims that basically the final claim was that the security guards had sexually abused her. They twisted her nipples, they beat her, everything, and her son was attacked. Straight after that, when they were actually arrested, there was no signs of this. 4 days later, she shows photos of many, many bruises everywhere and Gavin with his arm in a sling. So she takes out this case against J.C. Penney and actually wins a large settlement. So she's already got an element of going after money. When her son gets cancer, it's very much the same story, always about getting money. She gets the local community to do a drive for him, claiming that his medical expenses aren't covered by insurance, when in fact they were. So again, she was putting lots of pressure on raising all this money. It wasn't really needed for that purpose. She was also using it, well, they were all using it as a way to access celebrities. So there's actually quite a list of celebrities that they've sort of gone after and got gifts from, and that includes Adam Sandler, Chris Tucker, George Lopez, who I don't know very well myself, but at one point she's even got where she's accused George Lopez, who is a celebrity, of stealing $300 from Gavin's wallet. All very, very strange. There's always a lot of these accusations. When she's tried to get access to the comedian Jay Leno, he actually feels that there is something of concern and contacts the police at the time and said there's something wrong here and felt like there was a kind of a hit going on. Chris Tucker, obviously friends with Michael, he also gifts them and spends time with them. So you've got a lot of that background to them around this case. There is also welfare. There's a welfare case. She's done welfare fraud. So you can kind of see the type of person she is and the way that she's raising her children. She very much has them coached and goes to acting school for this J.C. Penney case. So there's a lot of elements of this. So they don't actually spend that much time in Neverland with Michael. It seems that he was there on 2 occasions, and on one of those occasions, he was actually avoiding them. The other times he was there, they were there when Michael wasn't around. Chris Tucker was there once, and, you know, the Arvizos were there then. So there's actually not been much time that they've spent together. He provided things like a car and gifts and money and various other things to help with Gavin's illness. So there's not many times. And the time of the sleeping in the bed, they don't claim that anything happened at that. What is very strange is that post the documentary, they have asked for help from Chris Tucker to say that they're being hounded by the press. He takes them to Miami when he's having a holiday with his brother. Michael joins them, and they fly on the way back to Neverland on a chartered ExtraJet flight. Now, this is where Gavin later starts to claim that on that flight, Michael has got him drunk. There was air hostesses as witnesses who claimed that absolutely that was nothing of the sort. And then Michael drank alcohol in Diet Coke cans actually to avoid his children or anyone seeing that that's what he was doing, didn't want to lead anybody astray. So what you have is they've got 3 different timelines that change. Those 3 elements of the timelines. So they basically say that this abuse happens in a very small period of time after the documentary is aired, and also at the beginning during the Department of Child and Family Services investigation. So they're trying to lead us to believe that whilst Michael is now being under investigation, he suddenly decides that's the key time to start abusing Gavin Arvizo. So it's just the timelines are absolutely insane. And as things come to the forefront and they realise the timelines don't work, it moves slightly by days. And they'll say there's 3 different, it moves 3 different times, very much as we see what happens in the kind of Robson case. So it moves as they realise that those timelines don't work. But this is the very odd thing about this case, is that we're expected to believe it happened afterwards. She also claims that when they're back at Neverland after that documentary, that basically they've been kidnapped and held against their will. And I'm sure you've probably heard the crazy story of she had planned to escape by hot air balloon. They weren't allowed to see the time, and yet it was shown that there's all the massive clocks around Neverland. So there's a lot of this going on. There's a lot of sort of evidence that just disputes all this claim. She's going out and having beauty treatments nearly every other day and buying lots of things, and all on Michael's money. And Michael actually as well isn't there. So she's claiming all this. She's being held by Michael's staff, her and her children, in order to film these rebuttal videos. So that was their way of trying to say, to counteract, well, why have you made such, videos with so much praise? So that's the main things in their timeline. Now, again, it isn't until they basically get told to leave Neverland, because Chris Tucker speaks to Michael and said he's very concerned now about this woman's intentions. And also we hear of a lot of destruction of property at Neverland, the way that their children are being so rude to the staff, they're stealing alcohol from Michael. There's lots of sort of that kind of attitude. So Michael actually has them removed from Neverland. So it's after that point, when they've kind of lost their meal ticket and their access to their meal ticket, there's suddenly there becomes some allegations. Now, again, not a family that have gone to the police. They go to Larry Feldman, who you might remember ended up the lawyer in the Jordan Chandler case who got settlement. So they go to him. They actually go and see 2 civil lawyers, and one being him. And then they start down this same route of going and seeing the psychologist and then getting the psychologist to report it. So again, you're seeing the same people involved. And of course, you see the return of Tom Snedden, who goes on this absolute mission to go after Michael. He does a search warrant with the 70 sheriffs who raid Neverland. Now, apparently, that's the most amount that have ever done a raid, no matter what the case, whether it be in a murder case. Also, the amount of money the prosecution spent, well, basically Tom Snedden spent on trying to prove Michael Jackson guilty, going to other countries to try and find children that would say things, basically is bigger than any case. It's most amount of money that's ever been spent on a prosecution case, even in a death penalty case. So it just shows how odd and strange this is, how much is being put in to absolutely try and seal the fate of Michael. So we see obviously that the Neverland and other places, Century City, are all raided. Now, one thing to just mention, because this comes up a lot, this whole child pornography, and we see a lot of the haters saying very much that child pornography was found. I mean, I think it's very logical that for anybody to understand, if it had been found, he would have been immediately arrested. He would have been immediately charged and found guilty, because possessing child pornography is a crime in itself. There never, ever was any child pornography found. They had 16 computers of Michael Jackson's that they went through. There was only ever any sort of visits to heterosexual sites of women. And the pornography that was found was, again, all very much heterosexual pornography. So things like Playboy, Hustler, and a few others. I have listed a couple into the document. And you can see that the FBI actually analysed those computers as well. So this is the FBI, who are extremely trained in, catching, the most wanted criminals, and they find nothing. And just to say, one of the sources there is this book as well, which you can see, which is the FBI found nothing. Not very good at, there we go, on the camera. But yeah, they went through there. So basically, there really wasn't any evidence. And as we know, it went to trial. On the stand, there's many elements where Gavin and his own brother's statement contradict each other. Janet is just very crazy on the stand for 3 days. She's saying outlandish things and being very much all over the place and sort of unravels. And then you have the prosecution at the beginning did assert that there was 5 victims. One of them they named was Brett Barnes, Macaulay Culkin, but these both actually appeared on the defence. Wade Robson, who actually, as we know, was a defence witness. Jason Francia, who actually came up earlier in the Jordan Chandler, who is actually a son, and it was around claiming that he was tickled, but his mother is actually one of the ones that had a case with Michael Jackson about being fired and sold stories out to the press. So obviously, as you can tell, very dubious. And then Jordan Chandler, who refused to attend and said that he would sue if he was forced to. So they actually only came out with the Gavin Arvizo, and they did put a lot of resource to find other victims, which never came to fruition. So as we know, obviously this day, back in 2005, was when Mike was found not guilty. But I think that's probably about as brief. There's lots more to it, but it's probably about as brief as I can keep it for the moment. So I'll hand back to you, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Angie, for wrapping this up in a few minutes. As you said, there is a lot more for it, and this is why we give you resources again, where you can read and dive into and get yourself knowledgeable. Yeah, what I want to say is I read this somewhere, I don't know if you read that too, that Tom Sneddon, he mobilized everything in St. Barbara County, like every vehicle, and it's that's what I heard, that he had like 70 police cars being on this raid, and there was just a single one left for all the duty in Santa Barbara County that day. And I also read, and I could not track the source anymore, that after the 93 allegations, Michael would have had a single person employed who is just always present when he is around with kids. Like when they are in his bedroom, this person would be there, and that was the whole reason of the employment, to just make sure that always somebody, as soon as he is with kids, is around. You have anything of that? You know anything of that? And
no, only that, like I said during that one, I know Frank Cassio.
Cassio, I was thinking about Cassio.
He was in the, he was in the room.
Yeah, yeah. So that I found that interesting, and that with all these police cars going out. So, and because this is so very interesting, everything, and we had Tom Mesereau also coming in to the act now. He was the lawyer of Michael Jackson in this big 2005 trial. So, and after the trial in the same year, in November, Tom Mesereau did a very, very, very interesting speech in Harvard Law School. He was one of the guest panelists together with Dan Abrahams. Dan Abrahams was in these days the face of journalists on the MJ case from MSNBC, is a TV station. And Martha Cockley is also on this panel. Yeah, she at this time she used to be district attorney. By now she is general state attorney elect in these days. So very, very smart person. And these 3 persons, they are discussing the Michael Jackson on the allegations and trial. on the subject of race and justice. And Mesereau gives a fantastic speech addressing questions of his cases, particular like all his cases, but particular Michael Jackson's case. And he slam dunks his case against the media and the misinformation of the media, which played a big part. Yeah. And it's always very interesting. So you can, when you watch it on YouTube, you can only watch the speech of Tom Mesereau. But I would recommend you to go to the full length, because then there is also like kind of rebuttal, or what Dan Abrahams has to say to that, which will make you rich. Michael Jackson got a fairer shake in the media than any other high-profile case has seen. So that made me almost puke. Good. So, and in our case, of course, this Martha Copley is also stating what she has to say, which makes very much sense in my eyes. So, and if you go to the whole length of this panel and of this show, you have to listen to the last question Tom Mesereau answers. And I think he is just perfect in this, because he saved the best for last.
Are you going to tell us what?
Yeah, you want to know now, no? Because like this was well, the whole talk and the whole event was on race and justice, and then he states that the trial and the allegations and the prostitution of Michael Jackson was not a matter of race and justice in his eyes. Yes, it was playing parts, and this is why he took the whole subject of race out. He didn't want to have this brought up, because he thinks, yeah. And then we go back to the 93, to the same persons being on the scene, that this was a matter of bringing a very, very famous person down. Despite of race, despite of everything, they wanted to bring a very famous person down for the gain of themselves, not of justice or of somebody, because they would be famous. Tom Snett and whoever was a role player then there, and of course the avisos of collecting money. So I found this very interesting. So you have to watch until the end and just see what he says to the last question, because there is a question and answer session at the end, and the last question being asked, what he answers there. I found this very intriguing. Yeah. So you also find
That's also.
Is it also in there? I did not reread. I read this book back in time. I did not reread. Yeah, but you can listen to the speech of Tom Mesereau on YouTube. Highly recommend that, because it also gives you an insight. Well, nobody was in the courtroom of the fans or whatever. I was like, this is really like, and it's just a little bit after, so it really gives you a very good impression of what went on in the courtroom and with the whole media mess and everything. Yeah. So watch this Tom Mesereau speech. Yeah. And talking about media, I want to show you something else. It's a very, very good article written by Charles Thompson. If you are following the MJ cast, Charles Thompson's name will sound to you. You will know who he is. So, yeah, it's one of the most shameful episodes in journalistic history. It's quite long, yeah, but it holds you all about the media mess also, and I think it's a very, very well written article. I'm always a fan of Charles Thompson, because he brings a bit of a brain and everything into this sometimes very emotional fan talk and view of fans. So, and if you are, again, if you're a not native speaker and you may have a big of a problem with reading a newspaper article, because yes, this is another kind of English again, I know. Then you have here a YouTube video which is based on this article, and I also sometimes I find it easier to listen and have pictures to show than just to read a newspaper article, which, as I said, can be a bit challenging. So for the not native speaker, you can go back on this YouTube video, which is also linked in the show notes. Okay.
Thank you, Daniela. They're all very valuable sources. I completely agree. I was going to say the same thing with regard to the article, Charles Thompson article. Certainly, one of the problems we have with people not assuming that the not guilty verdicts they should have been a complete exoneration, but in a lot of people's minds they aren't. And one of the reasons they're not is because the media never reported it correctly. And I think that article is a really good article for highlighting the terrible way that it was reported. It was obviously very biased and unfair. We all know that much of the prosecution case was reported. The cross-examination of the prosecution witnesses wasn't reported. And a lot of the defense case was completely ignored. So there's a lot of people in the general public who may have followed what was going on in the media of the case, and they're completely uninformed or misinformed because it was never reported correctly. And that article certainly highlights that. And
I always tend to.
Sorry.
I thought you finished. I always tend to think that this trial, this media reporting, was the beginning of nowadays fake news.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is.
I mean, I've heard people say before that the concept of fake news is not new to Michael Jackson fans, because we've had fake news our whole lives because it's, things have never been reported fairly or accurately or truthfully at all. So certainly that article is a valuable one to try and point out to people the terrible way that it has been reported. I was just going to add to what you said, Daniela, with regard to the Tom Mesereau Harvard speech is certainly one that's enjoyable to listen to. Personally, I think a lot of people are the same. Listening to Tom Mesereau is always very insightful. He's just wonderful to listen to. He explains the legal side of things. He's very informative. Anna Maria's just said she loves my accent. I hate my accent. But I think Tom Mesereau, obviously, we can listen to a lot of things from Tom, and we are very grateful that he's still around and still supporting Michael. The fact that it's important. Obviously, we know Dan Reed is trying to point out that, wrongly trying to point out that there's some sort of Michael Jackson machine paying Tom Mesereau to speak out for him. And it's simply not true. I mean, Tom Mesereau hasn't been employed by anything to do with Michael Jackson, any company or him personally, since 2005, and yet he still speaks out because he's an advocate for the truth and for justice and for fairness.
If you just once
listen to
you will know it's not true. If you just once listen to him speak, like in this speech now, no?
Yeah.
That it cannot be. No, it's not. No. But okay, who is going to do a speech like this if he doesn't have a special interest? So for Dan Reed, it's easy to be said in public, and nobody will go after proof.
So there are a number of Tom Mesereau podcasts and even interviews on YouTube. We'll again put all of those links in there in our document or show notes document. A number of MJcast episodes. Sorry, not a number, but there is a Tom Mesereau special MJcast episode, which goes for about 2.5 hours. That's a really, really good one to listen to and get lots of information. And in particular, it goes into the sort of more complex issues of the case and what was actually going on in the courtroom, how each of the witnesses would essentially fall apart under cross-examination. He caught many of them in lies and things like that, which obviously never went reported. And unless you've read court transcripts or heard directly from the people that were in the room, you can't be aware of those things. So there's a number of podcasts that Tom is on, which is good to listen to as well. The other source that I think you showed that one just before, Angie, Conspiracy is a good source, another book source, which focuses an entire book. It's quite a lengthy book that focuses on the trial from the perspective of a journalist who also gives us that little bit of a media sort of insight, I suppose. And Aphrodite Jones is quite open about the fact that she started the trial thinking that he was guilty along the lines of many other journalists, but that viewing the evidence and seeing what was going on, she, I guess, was more open to seeing the truth. And so this book was written to show actually what did go on, because from a media perspective, we never got to see that. Did you want to add anything about that one, Angie?
Only I've got the original that you mentioned, Danielle, as well, reading. And I have to say, I haven't been able to compare, but I read that one quite a while ago. I do feel like this is quite different in lots of it. And the Tom Mesereau stuff about race, not bringing that in, is covered in there. But I have to say, on the court, this book and this one on the criminal trial, I think are the best books for pulling out facts. This one, which was one that I did actually show a screenshot, and a few people asked me who it was, and actually the author is a member of the book club. There's really handy tables breaking down timelines and who people are and elements of the case. So it's really good. You can see there, you can see little Michael popping out the top there. On my thing, but it sort of goes through and it's very, very clear. So these two books, I mean, there are others, but I would say this is the best on the criminal trial with regards to books. And then still, again, the websites like the Michael Jackson Allegations, as you said, things with Tom Mesereau and Charles Thompson, they're also very good. So there's that one as well, Linton Guest. But that one, it's good in that he's covering kind of all the things that Michael's faced, but then you don't obviously get as much detail in there because the court case is maybe a chapter or two, but it goes into other elements and brings up one of my favorite topics, David Geffen, brings up Sony and various other things into that one.
I find the introduction to that book quite interesting, where there's I can't quote it verbatim, but he does he's introducing the allegations, and he essentially says that all we need to do is follow the money. And that's quite an insightful way of looking at it, because obviously we know that the root of a lot of these cases, it all comes down to money.
Yeah, he's got, Tommy Mottola, and he's got key people, like you say, involved in the money, and just does, as you say, go through that and really sort of put things together as to why Michael was facing so many issues throughout his life and what they're kind of tied to.
Another source that I listened to just recently was another MJ Cast episode with it's quite an older one. I'm not sure of the episode number, but it's the special with Scott Ross, who's the personal investigator who was working with Tom Mesereau in the lead up to the trial. And I found that another one that's really interesting to look at or to listen to, quite a few insights from a different perspective. And one of the things that I learned from that I hadn't heard before was that he actually sat down with David Arvizo, which is the father, and they couldn't call him to the stand because around the time that the Janet Arvizo and David Arvizo separated, she was claiming domestic violence. Now, I don't have any reason other than her reputation to suggest that perhaps that I'm not sure if those allegations towards David Arvizo were correct or not, but obviously there was a credibility issue there and they didn't want to call him to the stand. But a lot of Scott Ross's work came came from sitting down with David Arvizo and having about a 3-hour discussion with him about the family and about the kids. And David Arvizo admitted to Scott Ross that the entire JCPenney situation was completely Janet Arvizo's doing. She set the whole thing up. She coached the kids. She wrote down for them what they needed to say. She took the pictures of herself, everything, right down to the nitty-gritty. And he pointed out a number of things to Scott Ross, and kind of Scott Ross was able to use a lot of what he said to, I guess, branch out then his investigations in other areas using what David Arvizo had to say. So that was quite interesting to listen to that one. So obviously that will be in the show notes links as well.
Yeah, just on that, I've got that in the document as well. So yeah, she'd accused him in 2001 of abusing her, so domestic violence. But again, she's got other elements in there. So she also says against the children, and she also claims that, so child endangerment, domestic violence, and terrorist threats. She also says that he sexually abused his own daughter 12 years earlier and she'd done nothing. And very strangely, what she told the police was, oh, I've got many celebrities. This is what she seemed to be focused on. I've got many celebrities who can say about this. Kobe Bryant, whatever. And she went to the police station a few days later with photos of all these celebrities that she knew. Very, very bizarre. And Kobe Bryant actually, and he was part of the criminal trial, said he didn't know her. But she was using those kind of people as witnesses to her domestic violence claim. And apparently, yes, when all children interviewed about it, it all seemed very parroted from exactly what she'd said to say. And as I sort of mentioned before, that with the JCPenney, these bruises and the photos of them came days later after they'd actually obviously been arrested, and there was no signs of any of this beforehand. And you know, at the time it
wasn't added in until an entire year later.
But, yeah, exactly. And at the time she said that abuse was from the JCPenney, and then later she tried to say it was from her husband.
Always when I listen to these things, I wonder how in heaven this made it to a court. To have actually a trial. I mean, it's so nutty things. Yeah, you really want to prosecute. It's not because you see the reasons and you see a need. It's just really you want, for all circumstances, you want to prosecute.
I mean, I think the answer lies in, and I'm not going to say it's an error in the legal system, because I don't pretend to know enough about the legal system. But I mean, it got to that point because a prosecution case is presented to a grand jury and the grand jury decides to indict from that point. The problem with that system is that the prosecution never bothered to check into the family. They didn't check their credibility. They did no background work with regards to them to see if what they were saying was correct. And because a defense side can't be presented at a grand jury, only the prosecution side, the grand jury decides to indict and someone's arrested. I mean, I don't know enough, like I said, about the legal system, but that's how it happens. And I guess, you know, that's what the trial is for, I suppose, for making sure that somebody who is innocent effectively has a fair trial and can therefore be found not guilty and be vindicated. But what we've seen with Michael, though, is that despite the not guilty verdict, we haven't seen a full exoneration. The court of public opinion is still a negative one because the media has never justly reported it and never fully and properly explained it.
And I really believe that was the end of Michael. This is what like the start of the end, of a long suffering until the end. Yeah, it should not be. I just don't understand this grand jury. I mean, I heard like words like, or in the US you can like sue a ham sandwich or something.
Indict a ham.
Yeah, you have to see what you do to these people. You know. Yeah. Yes. Now it's not guilty and whatever, but you don't recuperate, and especially from accusations like this.
But the grand...
Sorry, Angie.
All I was going to just say is the grand jury as well were presented a lot of things from the prosecution as them having this evidence, which then later didn't appear. So there was things like child pornography, all these kind of things that was mentioned, 5 victims. So if you hear that, it probably sounds a lot more compelling and you think it has got to go to trial. But actually much of this that was said then couldn't be shown once it actually got to the real criminal trial.
But in front of a grand jury, is it just enough to say you have that? Don't you have to like show you have that? I don't understand.
The fact that they've got Brett Barnes, Macaulay Culkin down as victims, I think possibly they didn't, because obviously they appeared for the defence, so did Wade Robson. So,
well, they had it. They had the security guards and the people prepared to testify to say that they had seen these things happen. But unfortunately for Tom Sneddon, and you hear that story. Tom Mesereau tells the story of Tom Sneddon asked him on the day that he rested the prosecution case. He asked Tom Mesereau who his first witnesses were going to be, and when Tom Mesereau tells him he's calling Wade Robson, Brett Barnes, and Macaulay Culkin, Tom Mesereau nearly falls over because he can't believe he's got that 3 of the people that he's claiming were abused coming in to testify to say, no, nothing ever happened. And so a prosecutor who is prepared and who has done all that background work should not be surprised at something like that. But yeah, he was.
What brings us back again to the last sentence of the speech of Tom Mesereau. He was just like an opening to everything. Tom Sneddon really wanted to try a celebrity. And it just like, it happened to be Michael Jackson. Yeah.
Yeah. And certainly, like as you said, Daniela, it was something it had extremely long-lasting impact on Michael, and everybody saw the footage of him on the days coming into court, and as the months wore on, he was certainly it was taking a toll on him, and we all know that took years to recover, if recover's the right word, because I'm not sure that there was ever a full recovery, if that makes sense, because it took such a toll. Yeah. And just,
I think he took his last strength to pull himself together, yeah, in the last year. That was his last resources he had to go for this is it. But no, I would not say he recovered. How can you? Could you? I couldn't.
What was that, Daniela? Can we watch it?
What? I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just missed what you said. Did you ask us about This Is It?
No, I think for This Is It for the tour. I said he pulled his last resources together. Yeah.
Oh,
to
yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
But you cannot say that he recovered and now he went on a tour or he planned a tour. I don't see it like this. Oh, it makes me very sad to talk about it. Let's.
Yeah, it is very upsetting. I think that's probably a good note to move to the third and final section, and that's the newer posthumous allegations from Wade Robson and James Safechuck. The allegations obviously came about and as long ago as 2013, but a lot of people were made more aware of them, I suppose, with the 2019. We will not call it a documentary because it's not a documentary. TV show, perhaps we could call it, Leaving Neverland, where they presented effectively just their side of the story. It's certainly not a documentary, but a lot of people became more aware of these allegations a couple of years ago with that coming out. So I'll hand over to you, Angie, for a bit of a summary on these two.
I'll sort of be quicker on this because then we can discuss it anyway, because I see that we're running out of time a bit here, but I think most people sort of are more aware of this one. So we've got the as you say, I'll say mockumentary or assassination attempt, all this kind of thing. I think what we easily see is that Dan Reed is certainly not an objective member of this sort of thing as a director. He's very much involved in it. So you've got Wade Robson, who was defense witness in the 2005 trial. He goes along supporting Michael at the beginning of the opus. It's got this very, very gushing thing of Michael, like, you know, he's the best human on the planet. You know, it's all this gushingness. You know, he asked for his wedding to be there because Neverland's such a sacred place. All this stuff that just shows that, you know, he's just making this up now because it's all very, very pro him. He asked Janet to be part of the tribute after Michael dies. He goes to the memorial service. So really, are these any of the behaviours of somebody who's been abused? It doesn't seem so at all. So then he's basically getting to the point of having a little bit of a blip in his career. He seems to have burnt lots of bridges in Hollywood. We also know that one thing that's not mentioned in that Dan Reed production is that he had a relationship with Michael Jackson's niece, Brandy. She wants to obviously be conservative on her times because she doesn't want to be proven to have not spoke the truth. So she always says around sort of 8 years, but it could be longer. And actually Michael got them together. So there's none of that mentioned. There's all this narrative of Michael hated them talking to women, that Wade and James had never met, and all this nonsense that's now been obviously disproven. But his career was going down the pan a bit. He burnt bridges. He was the person who had the affair with Britney Spears when she was with Justin Timberlake. He'd had an affair with Prince's ex-fiance. So, you know, he's burning a lot of bridges in Hollywood and he's running out of money. He's trying to earn it from Michael Jackson. So he goes to the estate to try and do the Michael Jackson 1 Cirque du Soleil show. They turn him down for that. There is that wonderful footage where he's gloating on TV that he's actually doing it when he's been rejected, and then later claims that he doesn't even know that the estate exists, even though they've got the emails where he's basically begging for the job. So once he doesn't get the job, he goes about writing a book in 2012 about allegations. He's then trying to shop this book around and can't get it sold. The one thing where I said about Victor Guterres at the beginning, it was, if you look at a lot of what Gavin claimed happened, you'll see again, if you read that book, they're lifted. And the same with Wade's and James' stories. If you look at that, it's all lifted from that book pretty much. The fact, when you hear them, and obviously they do this in Leaving Neverland, be able to talk about such a horrendous thing so easily and with so much detail, it just isn't fitting in with really how genuine victims are. Gavin on the stand, you know, showed no emotion, was very kind of lackadaisical when talking about it, very easily just ran through these facts. And that's why I just think it's important that element, that sort of Victor, and you've got him linked with, you know, Diane Diamond and all these other players. I think you can see that, and Tom Sneddon, they're all linked together. You know, Tom Sneddon and Diane were at the wedding of Gavin Arvizo. They're all kind of linked in. And so very much, you know, the description of the abuse that apparently happened, you can see in that sort of book, and the similar things that they try and claim. So yeah, so basically a lack of money. And then he goes to make his claims, and then apparently James sees him on TV, and it suddenly remembers that he was also abused just after he finds out his family have been sued for a large sum of money and they need some cash. So here we go down, and we've got obviously the TV show. And I think what's been great is obviously this is where, if you look on Twitter, certainly from 2019, there was just things coming out and out and out from people, basically fans mainly doing the research. And you can see that there's so much of this. You've got the train station, the dinner that Taj was at, which, you know, they're claiming that was actually, you know, used as sort of thing to bribe Wade to testify in the 2005 trial, but actually it happened after he'd done his. There's so many elements to their time frame, and one of the most damning things is obviously you've got over the years what he said in court, and then certain depositions, and it just changes all the time. And that of his mother, and you see in 2016 deposition, they read things to him from before, and it's all kind of like, well, were you lying then? And he avoids saying the word lying. He said, well, I wasn't telling the truth. But his story and James just changes and changes and changes. I think most of us know a lot of that. It'll be great, you know, when there's more of a book on it. I have got this one, which covers briefly some of it, because you can see it says Ignore Leaving Neverland documentary. This is from a guy out in Nigeria who's a journalist. It's not got heaps and heaps of detail, but it is at least quite good at pulling through some of the facts. So it's a nice, quite thin, small book. But I think some of the other sources that are great on it is Lies of Leaving Neverland. So those kind of YouTube videos that have been made. And say quite a few of the Twitter people, I can't think of all their names offhand, but, you know, the main ones that we all probably retweet, who come out with lots of facts, including sort of Mike Smallcombe as well, and Damien Shields, but others that have got, I can't remember their Twitter handles now, but a lot of them that put a lot of that information out. But there's an awful lot there to cover, which we probably haven't got time for, of all the different things and the different accounts where stuff changes. But I think it's just looking generally that these now grown men have suddenly got financial issues, and oh, lo and behold, they suddenly remember this abuse, which is almost lifted out of Victor's book. I think that's generally all to say on that. And the fact that obviously been thrown out of court 3 times.
And suddenly remember 3 days after your statute of limitations is up with regard to being done for perjury, which I didn't. I always knew to explain what I've just said. I recently realised that Wade Robson claims he remembered that he was abused on May 8th. I might get that date wrong. If I'm pretty sure my memory has it. May 8th, 2012 was one of the first times that he became aware that it was abuse. Interestingly, that's 3 days after he testified on the 5th of May 2005. So the 7-year statute of limitations would have been up 3 days before he suddenly realised. So obviously that means he can't be taken into account with regards to perjuring himself on the stand if he's now claiming that that wasn't true. So I found that quite interesting. I knew that the statute of limitations was up, but I didn't realize it was literally 3 days. So that's quite interesting. So Daniela, how have you gone with the sources for this one? What are some of the sources that you've used to inform yourself on this case?
Yeah, of course. I mean, at the same site that I told you before, the author Michael site, or the other one in English, and the Michael Jackson allegations, they are all named already. I just want to mention one video clip which I found very useful. It's called Michael Jackson and Wade Robson, the true story. You can also find this with various undertitles in various languages. So this wraps it up like in 30 minutes. All others, there are different parts to watch. This is quite a short one, which I found useful to have. And then, of course, all the other websites, which we already mentioned as good sources, they cover that. Yeah. I'm sure there is so much to be said about this subject that it would last for another session. This is our. I don't really want to talk a lot about it. I just we mentioned the MJ cast for quite a bit in this show. So I want to give them a shout out, because if they would have not been with their really quick response, yeah, I can only talk for myself. I found this episode, yeah, this roundtable, as so helpful, because I felt so desperate. The first allegations, like in '93, and I explained to you in 2003 to 2005, I was not that intensely in it because I was away so much and I just not have the resources. But this was really different today. And well, I am not sure if they ever know how much good they did to fans with doing this special episode and doing it so quick. And I just want to say thank you.
No, yeah, I agree. Those couple of episodes that they did that were specifically focused on Leaving Neverland were as well as informative. The Leaving Neverland Roundtable kind of goes into ways to discuss this with people, because a lot of fans were encountering, negativity from many angles in their life, even from family and friends, people coming up to you and like saying things like, "Oh, how can you support a pedophile? How can you follow a pedophile?" And that can be quite confronting.
It was like real-time guidance. I mean, they would tell you what to do next, because you would have just like it slammed me really like, whoa, what do now? How to react? And that was just like reaching out the hand and taking me by the hand.
Yeah, it was all very, very comforting. That particular episode at the time, to have something to turn to and to hear them speaking about how they would say it. It almost gave you the tools to deal with what was going on and things like that, but also pointing out some of the information that we kind of needed to hear at that time. So I enjoyed those episodes as well. There's obviously a number of YouTube videos. I think you've mentioned a few of those, Angie, when you were doing your intro. We had there's Lies of Leaving Neverland, Leaving Neverland, The Aftermath, which the two of those, I think, highlight a lot of those errors that Angie was sort of summarizing in the beginning. The trip to the Grand Canyon, that in 2016, deposition, Joy Robson, Wade's mum, in a deposition says under oath that the whole family went to Leaving Neverland. She's actually asked several times over, and she confirms several times over, but then magically 3 years later, oh no, Wade was actually left behind. And things in that 2016 court deposition is actually quite telling, because she testifies. I'm not sure if that's the right word, testifying you don't testify in a deposition, do you? It's a different word, I think. But
Yeah.
she states in that deposition that they were only at Neverland 14 times in the time when Wade was essentially a child, but that Michael was only present for 3 or 4 of those times. I mean, that's a very, very different story to what is told in Leaving Neverland, where it's made out that it's hundreds of times. So I think one thing that we all need to be, I suppose, very aware of is the fact that their own court documents, which not only contradict their own previous court documents, they're also a different story as presented in Leaving Neverland. And some of those YouTube videos are really good for highlighting those things for fans and showing us where those inconsistencies and contradictions, where they come from and where they lie. Did you have any other sources you wanted to mention, Angie?
Not directly on those. I think Nikki just mentioned the Twitter handles that I was trying to think of. So yeah, they're great. There's lots of information on there. I did retweet lots of it in 2019 and screenshot it on my phone, so I've still got heaps of it. Just other 2 books to mention on sort of allegations. You've got this one by Lisa Campbell, which is Michael Jackson, the King of Pop's Darkest Hours, and then this one, which is Michael Jackson, the Conspiracy to End the King of Pop. So they all kind of touch on the allegations, and then what really happened to Michael Jackson as well at Leonard Road. So they do sort of cover elements of all these allegations. But I think for sources, we've probably covered the main ones. There's quite a bit out there that's not in book form on obviously Leaving Neverland, but there is quite a lot of information out there. And the upside of it is we've seen new fans come from it, and then obviously things like Billie Jean getting to over 1 billion views. I think it's really got people, out there again defending him and sort of renewing people's passion for him and gaining new fans. Because when I went to the Square One premiere, I actually met one of them, and that was really uplifting, because after such hideous times, to actually meet people that have become fans out of that horrible TV program it was great to sort of see the upside to it. So I think that's it. And I do think this will really work towards clearing his name in the end. It may take some years, but I think it will.
Yeah, and I think an outcome of it is also that the fan community got so much closer again. Yeah, and still is. I mean, I got in contact with people I did not hear for I don't know how many years off, and it was just like you picked it up where you left it last time. Yeah, so a lot of new things came out of this also, like new fans, like new communities. That's nice to see. Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Daniela. One of that tightness of the fan community, I think, is a big thing. As well as new fans, I think for some fans, it's kind of ignited a flame in them. I know I've kind of had a conversation recently where I said that, you know, if I think about the my sort of MJ obsession, as I call it, if I think of it as a fire that's been kind of smouldering away my whole life, Leaving Neverland sort of poured fuel on the fire. And I know that that's the case for Emma, who couldn't be with us tonight. Unfortunately, she's not well. But both of us were brought back into the fan community. We were never not fans. We've always, you know, been involved in different things and listening to music and watching videos. But Leaving Neverland sort of brought us into. We found the book club and we found some of the other groups that we're a part of. And I definitely think that Leaving Neverland has made a lot of fans sort of want to fight for not only Michael's name in terms of pushing for that awareness to be more accurate and more truthful out there in the mainstream, but we also want to push for that positive side of his legacy that's sometimes overlooked because of these negative things. We don't always want to focus on the negative. I know we're focusing on that today, but it is Vindication Day, and it is the time to focus on that and remind everybody of the truth. And the rest of the year in particular, that's where we focus on, you know, all the amazing things that he did, the way he changed music and changed the world, changed our lives, and kind of, you know, push for his legacy to be that, and be the way it should be, I suppose.
Probably
I think this was perfect. What is the session? Could not have been planned better than what we did now.
I like that we were able to bring it back to something a little bit more positive, because as much as the haters out there, and Leaving Neverland was created to try and destroy Michael, but in some ways it's having the opposite effect, because us fans are going to get behind him, you know, 10 times more than we were before, because we're not going to let this destroy him. So everybody, there is a post on the Facebook group asking us if you do have a Twitter account to jump on Twitter today. We want to get Michael Jackson innocent, not just the MJ innocent, but Michael Jackson innocent is the hashtag we're promoting today. There's a couple of banners that somebody, I'm sorry, I forget who posted this earlier. I'll reshare it later on so that everybody can jump on board, and we're trying to get that trending, just to raise awareness on Vindication Day for the injustice of these false allegations. And for the rest of our of the year, we're going to keep focusing on promoting all those wonderful things from Michael's legacy. And so thank you for joining me tonight, ladies. It's tonight for me. I know it's morning for you both. And hopefully all of the people who are watching, whether you're watching live or perhaps maybe watching this later on, you can still see it on the book club later on, that you've enjoyed it and hopefully learned something from it. And we will be sharing our document with you that's got heaps and heaps of links for you to explore that, to hopefully learn something new, and to continue your Michaeling journey, I suppose. Was there anything anyone wanted to add before we end our broadcast?
No, all good.
Okay, then. Well, thanks again. Bye.